So this is kind of we have stuff on the back too. But the main thing that I kind of touched on where my brain was at was something that some of my coaches and mentors mentioned back my junior year of high school is a passive versus active intake. So passive intakes use gravity, rubber bands, latches, force, etc., stuff that can be undone, whereas active intakes have a dedicated motor to power the intake's main function, or for anything, a shooter, whatever you may use. I thought it might be important to think about this, whether we use a passive specifically for the intake, because then it's less that the programming team has to work on. So we could prioritize our climber and our shooter being active, where if we have an intake being passive, I don't know if you guys are aware of, or if you've learned about this. I'm not trying to like say you don't know what it is, but just figured it's something important to think about. So like we kind of have some active and passive ideas. Just something to float around, again, trying to save programming team time so then we can be more efficient with our shooter and our climber. So, pass it off to Madeline.
Yeah, so I'll go over some of our specific ideas here. The first two we had were kind of intake ideas. We had a hug bot that was just arms that extend and shovel them in, and then kind of a plowy bot too, to stick with the name theme of just a ramp in the front and then ball in robot. I think where things get more interesting is the climber. We had a track climb idea, so this would be a belt with multiple hooks on it. There could be 2 of them, and then it spins to catch the different rungs. So they'd be 18 inches apart, because that's the width of the rungs that we're trying to climb on. So we'd have the first hook catches the low bar, and then the next 2 hooks swing around and catch the next 2. Another idea was maybe having 2 of these mechanisms, and we could go over the edge of the support and kind of stay away to the side, and maybe even shove that way into the corner so the whole frame perimeter is kind of past that support. We had a diagram of the trench just to think about. I think we'd need to do more CAD and dimensions to figure out if our swerve drive is working well for that. And then on the back, we have a few more ideas. This was another intake idea that had just a few roller wheels. And the idea here was to try and get the balls up higher into kind of the center storage area, so the intaked balls would load into the top and feed from the bottom to a flywheel that went the whole width of the robot. And then it could retract vertically. We were also thinking that it would be very important for the intake to fully retract because of defense and whammy and poor broken robot. Yeah, and then another climb idea back here. This one would use a bumper cutout and have a gap in the bumper, and it would sit kind of perpendicular to the rungs on the side, and then pull up and use the frame piece to brace and pull the rungs through the cutout in the bumper, and then have 2 hooks, one that's fixed and one that moves all the way, so there's an 18-inch gap between the 2 hooks, and then it condenses to transfer from the actuated hook to the fixed hook. We had a few ideas over here. Yeah. I don't think vacuum's possible. Vacuum's not possible. Yeah, any ideas? Any comments? Any?
So this design here for climbing, is that, so if the bars are going this way, are you grabbing onto the end like this? Okay, cool, I like that. I didn't think about that.
Just trying to stay as much out of the way of other robots.
I like that. Yeah, because then you can get a 3-person climb.
The one where you said that it has a passive and an active going up and down hooks, you said it seemed like you implied having the passive go back and forth, go like side to side to get out of the way or something like that, some side shift in and out.
You need to have something either just be able to be pushed out of the way or actuated out of the way. Yeah.
The pushed out of the way one is something that we talked about as well. And one thing about the climb is that if we want to do it on auto as well as otherwise, then we kind of have to have it be able to be undoable in some ways, so that we can get the auto and the tele-out points ideally. And that's just a problem for all
It
kinds
is
of
an
clients.
interesting idea, yeah. Just probably geometry, math, dimensions problem later on.
I guess you could use the second bar to pull yourself back up off the bottom one or something like that, yeah.
So an issue we were running into when we were designing our own climber idea, which is something I think all of them have, is it has to be within the frame perimeter the entire time and then extend outwards to do so. The issue we were having is we feel like it, I don't want to say like it has to or X, Y, Z, but we have to find a way of getting the bumper back out of the way while it's trying to get past the first rung and then above it. So when we had done it, I'll get to that later, but it's no matter what climber we do, whichever one we decide to do, it has to have some way of actuating out of the way to allow the bumper to get past the first rung if we ever want to do it higher than one point.
I think we can avoid that too by bracing ourselves against this post, either on the front or the side, then we can't swing inwards.
I completely agree. That was something we were also talking about spacing against. I think it's a good idea.
If so one of the things I think you touched on it with the bringing your intake back in, so with the extending out part, that can be an issue. If your climber extends out in the back, it has to be able to extend back inside your frame perimeter if you're going to do same climb in autonomous. So actually, I kind of really like the use the frame cutout for the climb potential option, as then you don't have to extend back inside your frame if you just put the bar, since it is such a tiny bar, ultimately speaking, and if we use the swerve drive, we can just go up to it and slot it into a tiny hole that then stabilizes several axes of motion, and then even goes inside of our frame a decent chunk of distance so that we could not have to extend our mechanisms back inside so we can undo our climb easier potentially.
Yeah, I think there is about a 6-inch, it sticks out about 6 inches past the edge. Helps. But then the other thing to be careful here is the support piece in the back. We can't get the bumper stuck on that as we go past it. So if we stick, and if we're leaning inwards past the plane of the support, then we'll catch on the support.
Is
The other
Is the
bar.
support in the middle bar, or is it
It's between the first and the second.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other last comment? And then we can move on to the next group. Pretty all set? Sweet.
Hello, everyone. So we have split ours kind of up. We did focus a lot on climber, as we think that intaking and our scoring / shooting will be primarily pretty trivial. This has been done a lot. There has been like nearly 20 first games that have been intaking and shooting balls of some sort. So we didn't worry too much about that. We kind of agreed that some sort of pivoting intake with either wheels or rollers is something we're interested in. The pivoting being able to retract. Okay, so this one was more of like, kind of like a, how did you describe, a water wheel sort of thing? So basically, the wheels kind of rotate around. Do you want to come up? Jake can explain it. He understands it better than I do.
It's basically kind of like a water wheel where there's going to be hands and it spins around 360 and the balls will just come in and it'll pick it up and turn it all the way around and it'll hit the top and just roll into our storage wherever it would be. And that's it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Jake. And then this other one is a more common FRC sort of thing, something that pivots out a roller that is spinning really fast. As soon as it touches the ball, it pulls it against the bumper and then up and over the bumper, something like that. For our scoring mechanism, which is shooting the game piece, we considered catapults, spring punchers, and belt launchers, but ultimately decided that we're probably just going to spin a wheel really fast. Yeah, that's how that goes. And then we moved on to climbers. So we first started with our telescoping arm kit that we have and realized it probably will not work because, reasons. If you cut the tubes short enough to be within the frame height, you don't have any room to retract, basically. It basically doesn't extend high enough to do anything really useful. Then we said grappling hook, and unfortunately realized that if you shoot a grappling hook out of the top of your robot, that does unfortunately include, that is part of your frame and part of your robot that you are extending past the 30 inches. Yes, Jake? Yes. Yes. So just a simple have a hook somewhere on your robot and pull a string down. That easy L1 climb. We could probably figure out how to do that. Then we had this monkey climb, which was, what was that? Isaac, monkey climb? Kind of climbing like a ladder, just like a human would. Yeah, something like that. And then, so we decided that we would like to pursue some sort of chain or loop climber, which is similar to what Madeline's group came up with, kind of some chain and sprocket sort of mechanism with multiple hooks on it that kind of rotate around, grab one latch, and then this one comes around once this one is pulled down to flip the hook onto the next rung. We came up with this idea. We did really like this one. We did realize that the geometry to try and get these hooks spacing worked out would be slightly difficult. And so, where did we end up? It's on the back side. What? Yeah. Okay, so this is a top-down view of the robot. We're assuming our intake is going to be opposite of our shooter, which is there. And so this is the climber. And, what? Yeah. So basically, this is the vertical post. The vertical post is pushed up against the bumper, and these two circles right there are the chain loops with the hooks on them. So we think we can climb off-centered by putting one hook on the inside and one hook on the outside. That way, if we start rotating this way, the vertical there will stop us from completely falling off the bar. The bumper will be fully pressed up against the vertical to try and prevent us like leaning backwards, if that makes any sense. So basically the bumper there will provide the force to counteract that rotation. Where were we? Okay, so we had this idea. We liked this idea. And then we considered having the hooks trying to go over the top of the sprockets at the end of the chain will be kind of difficult, because the only way that I know how to attach to a chain is by putting little bolts through the holes of the chain, and that prevents you from going around a sprocket, unfortunately. So we pivoted to a different idea, which I am now realizing we haven't really drawn out completely. I guess this is kind of the closest picture. This is having two separate of these loop runs, but each of them only having a single hook on them, so that you can independently control the two chain runs and move hooks up and down independently. So basically you would get the first hook on the L1. So this is kind of what we tried writing out over here. So we have hook A and hook B. Hook A latches onto L1, pulls down, while hook B eventually, using some sort of spring mechanism, gets past the bar and hooks itself onto the L2 bar. Then, so once the climber B is over the L2 bar, the climber A would lift back up. Basically, you're going, huh, and then something like that. It works in my head. I need to do some geometry to figure out if that actually works. I think that independently controlling the two hooks is probably better than trying to get all three of them on a single chain run. It will be more complex to program, as Isaac mentioned. You guys can do it. Yeah. I believe we have the resources to accomplish it. The one thing Aiden brought up, getting outside the frame perimeter, is something that we hadn't fully considered. So we do need to work around that issue with this design if we choose to further pursue it. But yeah, so basically have some sort of spring-loaded hook that's able to slide past the bar, and have two separate climbing hooks that independently control and go up. Yes, Darren?
For getting over the outside the frame perimeter, can you just have them start on the back side of the chain as it's drawn, and then you not have any, just have them lined up in such a way that they don't extend? I mean, yes, even if you were trying to do the three hooks on one, so and the height of it can't be total, you can make the total chain longer by including a third spacer sprocket, which makes it a triangle, and then allows you to have the length of chain necessary to have the hooks spaced out and not have them start outside the thing. And also, if you're saying potentially the hooks could be extended out with a square so that they're not directly against the sprocket, but rather are spaced off from the chain a little bit to give you that extra depth to get past the bumper.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can work around that. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Having the hooks start inside and have them rotate around. Yeah, that would work most likely. Yes, thank you.
I had a quick comment. I don't know if I'm going to repeat literally everything that Derek just said, but I think I have a way of it starting. If it started at the bottom, it could be, so you're hinged already, right?
Yes.
So if you're hinged, if your hinge load is at the bottom, have a flat panel there pressed inside of.
Then the first time they lift up, they spring out.
Yeah.
That would only work in auto though. That would only work.
It would eliminate the ability to do auto first time. The moment it springs once, you cannot return it.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, because you can't extend rotor.
That would be on that.
Yes. I was about to say, yes, good.
It would allow you to climb at all,
Yes.
which is more important than being able to climb.
Most
So
likely.
if you-
Okay, realistically, if this gets us an L3 climb, that is 30 points.
Compared to 50.
I'm fine taking the 15-point tank in auto if that's
Yeah.
the case. If this works.
Yeah.
Okay, and then on the backside, we do have a general layout sketch on how we're thinking things might work. Ball come in on this side. This is an intake roller or wheel, maybe a little ramp to kick it up over the bumper. Ball comes in, gets stored in some big hopper that has a little slanty floor. The floor the balls roll really nice against each other as far as we can tell so far. And the kitbot as well uses some sort of passive funnel system, so we think we can probably steal that instead of needing some sort of active thing. We're planning, so normally your hooded shooter kind of is opposite of this. Because we are shooting, okay, so we were talking, we don't really have a way to aim our robot. We don't have a vision system. I don't feel like forcing your programmers to design, I don't know. I don't know what that all entails, so I'm not even gonna bother forcing you guys to do that. We think putting flat bumper against flat wall and shooting with fixed angle is probably really nice and easy. So I erased the hub, but the hub would be on this side. You would retract the intake, run this bumper up against it, and then shoot that way. I don't know if that fully works. We had considered putting the hub on this side and then realized that the hub is like the hub starts almost immediately above where that wall is. So we're not sure if the bumper is enough space to get that kind of underhand shot that we were talking about. We're not sure. Also, we are considering potentially shooting up to 3 balls next to each other, or maybe 2. In 2017, all of the teams that were really good in high volume shooting shot 2 balls next to each other at a time. And this goal is a lot wider than the 2017 goal. So we have the potential to shoot 2 next to each other, if maybe even 3.
So, we're probably going to start with the climber because it was the thing we thought was funniest. So actually, I meant to ask you a question. What was the issue you had with the climber in the box? But precisely. Because our design relies on the climber in the box. If you deemed it does not work, then ours will not work either.
So it's a telescoping tube,
Yes.
right? You need your outer tube to be as tall as possible, but that only works if you can extend upward. Basically, you can extend upward.
It's not doubling the length, correct? It's like 75%. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you extend up, the maximum you can reach is.
You can only go 30 inches up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I'm not sure if it doesn't work out. We just kind of
Need to-
decided to.
like it does work for my design. In my brain, it totally works, I promise. Certainly it'll work, right? Haha. So ours functioned very similarly to a design that my team had done for Rapid React. The mechanism this requires to do would require 3 motors, one of which powering the driver of the box, and the other 2 articulating both arms. In theory, I think you might be able to manage with just articulating one of the arms, leaving them perfectly static, but that is a big ask, and I have no idea if that would work. The thought would be, is you'd have 2 hooks, one static, one not, as mentioned, and actually, and the layout, they're better described there. These arms would pivot back and forth, maybe even just 5 degrees. This was done to address the issue that I had brought up at the very beginning, where you have to reach outside the frame perimeter. If both are articulated, that solves the issue pretty fast, because they can move. That's crazy. Sorry, I'm being really theatrical here. So one arm would move up and down. In theory, if you could grab the first rung, pull yourself up, you could then click the other one into place, let go, leave it slack, and the other one reaches up to grab the next one. You would then complete this cycle over and over and over again to get to the top. In theory, this works. We calculated the arm would need to be at least 16-ish inches right here. These are all extremely rough calculations. No idea if that's right. But it was roughly estimated to be 16-ish inches in theory to be able to clear the bottom of it. The concern I kept having was if you have a static arm, can you rotate yourself up high enough to where your bumper actually clears the mid-rung? That was something I thought about at least. The original idea we also had was a very one similar to, I think almost everyone has mentioned a spring-loaded hook design. I think we also mentioned that was mostly Ronin, and I think Noah, you had one like that as well, right? A spring-loaded hook. Which you push up, it move out way, it click back in place, you go up now. Pretty simple. The concept of having it rotate is going to be a little tricky. You're going to need a lot of torque. The biggest concern of mine with this is if you are cantilever beaming your entire robot's weight off of one hinge at the very edge of your robot. Good luck, this will be fun. In theory, it works. No idea if it will in practice. That'll be something good to test. The shooters, we went...
So if you have strong enough pneumatics and you have arms that move back like this, if you've ever seen American Ninja Warrior, the salmon ladder, I would like to see someone's team treat this as a salmon ladder and just jump, grab the next rung, jump off it, grab the next rung.
Jumper bot in the year of our Lord 2026?
Jumper bot 2026.
Yes. Thank you.
Year of our Lord 2026?
We call it jumping. Poppy.
So what team did the jumper bot?
Yeah, what team was that?
Do it again. So that was hilarious. That was the funniest thing I've seen. What team was that? I can't remember. Anyways, shooters. We did the stereotypical flywheel shooter, belt shooter, same design, dual wheels. Other design is aesthetic C shooter. We did joke about doing a variable C shooter. Go ahead. How about your idea?
Which one?
The variable C shooter.
Oh.
This is mostly the bit. We were like, this would be ideal, but vision be a thing.
So I'm sure most of you know what a variable C shooter is. It's the you have a big flywheel, then you have the hood that goes in and out to change the angle the ball leaves at. You can also make it even more complicated by adding a turret and a small flywheel to add more backspin. Greatest shooter ever made. We do not have the time for that, so.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think it's a wonderful idea. That's a negative attitude. Get with the program. Anyways. Okay, good. We also did joke about a puncher. I had to tell them no pneumatics. They kept saying pneumatic things. I do not know what programmers' obsession with pneumatics are. No, they're not.
They're easy on my end.
They're not on my end. So it was an uphill battle, and I had a great time. You guys are awesome.
I did like my 8 pneumatic cylinder climber.
One of the ideas proposed was 4 pneumatic pistons with hooks on the end. That was a climber idea, and I love it here. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. We had a good time. Unironically, I actually had a great time. Intake. I will be completely honest. I trust in whatever you do way more than whatever I could come up with. But we did end up saying single or 2 beater bars to get the proper travel. Articulation is not really an option. If you do not articulate our intake, we can't climb. We found out, we went through the rules again just to be sure. In other previous years, the rules get changed when endgame happens. The one edge at a time doesn't go away. So if you ever drop an intake and you can't retract it, you can't climb. Unless you get directly below it, only do L1. In that case, sure. Yeah. Also, the only other fun thing about our climber design, if it works with climber in a box, is we could do L1 to let ourselves go again, because it articulates a lot, which also uses 3 motors. What's up, Darren?
I think you said that it's impossible to have a climber if you don't intake. Now, technically, you could squeeze the climber in and have a smaller intake. It would cost intake size and complicate things by having all your weight on one side, but it's technically possible.
For the sake of pedantry, yes, you could absolutely put the climber in the dead center of your robot and like rotate upwards like that. It'd be hilarious. But yeah, of course, it's totally possible. But
Well, I was actually saying have your intake be on the same side as your climber, so then your auto can pop out and stay out, and then you can have it just the hooks be extended out already.
Yeah, you totally could do that in theory. So that's intake. The hopper, we ended up deciding on gravity fed. We did some really janky math, extremely janky, of how many. I did erase it. Actually, that's kind of unfortunate. We did the extremely rough math of how many balls we could possibly fit in it, including the fact that we need to make the trench run. We ended up doing was like 60. 60-ish if you do make the trench run. If you don't make the trench run, that gets funny fast. So it's like, I mean, it's
about factoring in room for intake and shooter.
it's if you packed. If you no, not even that. It was a little bit less, keeping in mind that we have some space for a shooter, some space for battery, some space for swerve, yada, yada, yada. It was roughly 60-ish if you pack them literally perfectly, which is impossible, but it's still a excessive number.
That is a large number. Also,
Excessive. Funny.
we've been talking a lot about making trench run. It's important to know, even if we can get over the bump, being able to make both is strategically very useful, because there's only 4 entrances in and out of your zone, and defense will probably be very heavy since you can't score when the other team's scoring. So someone can easily block like most of those entrances, and if you can't do 2 of them, you just lose out on those 2 even if they're not being defended, which is suboptimal.
So I think the last thing we have to say here is hopper, gravity fed, driven in with the intake. We had an idea of how we want to index them, having maybe even just 2 motors or a wheel on some side to feed upwards into a shooter. Just an idea. And then the funniest thing I think we had here so far is having it shoot out the side, because we're field oriented. We don't care which direction we are, as long as you know which side forward is. Shoot that way. It's fine. Yeah, save space. You don't have to shoot over your hopper, then you don't have to shoot over your climber. Shoot at the side because there's nothing else there.
And if you can fit 60 of them into your robot,
That was a huge asterisk. That is impossible, but
then
hilarious.
what is 25 seconds of not being able to shoot? Just sit there and eat them for 30 seconds and then go back and shoot them all at once.
So we came up with 3 designs total, all using different mechanisms. We assembled them different ways so that you can kind of see what we think works best together, kind of mechanism-wise. First up, we'll go with this design. So we have an over-the-bumper intake with just a piston actuator that brings it in and out, so you can get it back up and into your frame perimeter, into this sloped hopper, which would then have a belt system, which Q will talk about in a second, that leads it up through a hood, and then we'd be able to shoot with that. And additionally, we have 2 climbers, which would be able to rotate down. Once again, as talked about, you need a lot of torque for that, but it would be a really good way to do it. And before I move on, Q, do you want to talk about your belt system?
So the balls, they go down into the hopper of the fuel, and they would be kind of funnel fed into these 2 parallel belts that would then squeeze onto the ball to lift it up, and then eventually we just hit the flywheel and then shoot off into the off of like a C. I guess you guys call it a C, the chute. Shoot off the angled chute that's pre-angled, stationary, simple, but it would allow for slower indexing, so it's not just all getting jammed into the flywheel. And it kind of just gets slowly fed up, and then when there's room, another one feeds in and continues like that.
So one of the things to note about all of our designs is that we just, from previous experience, our understanding is that a couple, like 2 lines of rollers that are linked together with a single motor, so it's simple to drive, and then it just goes, it is gravity held down on all of our designs roughly, so that it applies pressure to the ball, and then the ball gets dragged along the floor, held in contact with it, then it's held against the bumper in contact with the rollers as well. It goes up over the bumper and then inside the frame perimeter, so there's no holes in the frame perimeter for these designs. Also, we don't really have it shown on any of the shooters. We assumed flywheel shooter of some variety. Probably not with an articulated hood or C, as was said, because more complicated, and then that's an extra variable that's really needed to be tuned in and probably requires vision in order to be a quick and easy way to do it. But it could potentially have 2 linked motors on the flywheel or they could be linked with a gear ratio or something like that to provide backspin in different variables. These are all tunable variables, or it could just be a single wheel attached directly to the motor and just a shroud or C to launch it in at the right angle. It all depends, and we don't really have any options for that. Just that takes tuning and testing.
Our next design over here is, once again, over the bumper intake. And then we have kind of, as we discussed previously, I think it was in your group, Luca, how you had the kind of vertical rotating belt. That was actually your climber. For us, we have that kind of dumping balls into our deep hopper, And by taking them up vertically from intake, we're able to have a much higher hopper, which means a lot more fuel. So then we have it going into a water wheel design with a flywheel on the kind of end of that, so it's then able to launch into the, what's the name of it? The hub? Hopper? No, hub? Thank you. I'm still learning the game-specific lingo. And then we have, as was stated previously, just a spring-loaded kind of climber that springs in and then can spring back out once it actually gets over that rung. And then flip. Oh, we caught all the other whiteboards. That's all right. Oh. Okay, so this was our combination of our favorite ideas. So still, once again, over the bumper intake, but we had, what did you call this, Darren?
A 4-bar linkage system, so that I stole this idea from my high school team. So it makes use of a pneumatic piston to push out the system. So first it starts in backwards rhombus position, and then it goes up slightly as it's going out because it's pivoted at the front, and then it goes down again when it gets passed into the final position of the 4-bar linkage. So it allows it to be, instead of like dragging along or being pushed along with just pure friction, it instead rotates and is held in its states instead. Also, in general, the pneumatic system, it does, it was discussed earlier that you want safety impacts. So our team in my high school year, senior year, we got our intake smashed because we had a pivoting system that dropped down in front. And so our solution to that was that you can deactivate both ports on a double pneumatic solenoid system, and so then it can be in a floating state where technically it can go back and forth, but it should stay out unless you run into something, in which case it can collapse backwards and be fail safe in that way. So, and the 4-bar linkage part is just to make it so that it's able to go up and over the bumper and then retract back in more smoothly.
So this design also has a vertical way to get our fuel from the intake up into a deep hopper, because as Aiden discussed, theoretically you could get 60 fuel in here, but the only way to do that is to actually get your fuel up and into the deepest hopper possible. So if you just have intake from here, you're going to get maybe 1 layer of fuel. That's not going to get you anything, like maybe 8. So we have kind of a wheel on here with some surgical tubing that it would trap it in, and then we get it up over into this deep. And then from previously, we once again have the hood shooter. So you would have a sloped kind of hopper system that's all leading to this entry point, which would, as this first design, go up with these belts, have a flywheel in here, launch it through there, and then climbers on the back edge. And with this one, we talked about having it braced up against the horizontal support on the rungs of the actual, what's the name of the ladder system? I'm still learning them. The tower, thank you guys. So on that vertical support of the tower, so that it's not swinging a lot, and then you don't have to worry about it going back and forth as much, and it makes it a lot easier to work with.
It was suggested by one of the other groups that we could have a parallelized shooter, and honestly I really like that. As we talked about a parallelized intake system, so of course the wide width of the hopper of the intake that extends out means that you have a wider reach and are able to wider things, but usually it funnels down to a one wide system. However, we thought about what if we have a wider going up into the hopper so that you don't decrease your throughput in the wrong spot. And then we could potentially, of course, make additional throughput by having a wider shooter system. And I think we already talked about the hooks being flipping out. So to start the match inside your frame perimeter, they could be down, then using the telescoping arms, they could go up, pop out because they're spring loaded, and then you're able to go up and grab onto one, and when your hook is going by the next rung, it gets pushed in and then pops back out when you go up past it, and then you pull back down to pull up and grab the next rung, and then you do that in a repeating fashion such that you're able to do it. Although potentially could have difficulties undoing that. There could potentially be a mechanism to make it go back inside when you lower it all the way down. I mean, even potentially passive ones that make use of the telescoping arm that you pull all the way back down and you just never pull it all the way back down inside of it, so that it's not another motor or pneumatic system to undo the climb after autonomous. And Luca mentioned that, well, he's willing to sacrifice the autonomous climb if it means we get an L3 climb at the end, but that's actually only 5 points additional with the L3 climb. If you don't get the autonomous climb, it would be much, I mean, because if you can do it an auto climb, a single layer climb, and then do it again at the end of the match, just by it being a simple mechanism, that's worth the 15 for the auto plus the 10 for the ending. Whereas if you can't do an auto climb and you can only do an L3 climb, that's worth 30 points at the end of the match. So that's a difference of 25 versus 30, so 5-point difference. So ideally, that all has to be weighed into a consideration.